Hey class, in this lecture we're going to begin a 3-lecture series on the problem of pain. And as you know, you are going to be reading The Problem of Pain from C.S. Lewis. It's an incredible read. There are portions of it that are kind of tough to get through, and right as soon as you get through the tough part, you come to an incredible part, and it just is so worth it. But just when you get to a tough part, just push through. I think you're really going to enjoy this book. I want to talk right now about the first, in this first lecture, about free will. And some of this lecture is going to be based upon the Problem of Pain book, and then some of it is going to be based upon some of Mere Christianity. And in both of those books, he talks about free will. But I think that free will is so important for us to understand. It's something that I'm very passionate about. One of your assignments that I've given you in this class is to read the essay that I wrote on if God is all loving and all powerful and all wise, why does evil exist in the world he created? And the first reason, I believe, is free will, and really the abuse of free will by human beings. But if we don't understand free will, then we are going to credit God for much of the evil that happens in the world, or we will disbelieve God altogether. And so I want to take this class period and talk about that. We're going to take an entire lecture and talk about the fact that most people who don't believe in God don't believe in God because of emotions, because of something that has happened in their life. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next lecture. But I wanted to take a lecture and talk about free will. This lecture is going to focus on why evil exists, even though God is good. But I have to be honest with you, not all Christians agree on this idea of free will. And so I wanted to take a moment at the start of this class, and I wanted to talk about the 3 views that Christians hold on free will and the sovereignty of God. And I will state that I don't consider this to be an essential doctrine. That is to say, there are good friends of mine in the ministry that disagree with me on this, and we'll find out when we get to heaven who is right. But I certainly am not going to separate with a brother in Christ over this. But I do feel like it's important. That's why I'm teaching it. And I do believe that a false view on this leads to an improper view of the nature of God. So let me explain. There are 3 views in the Christian world on God's sovereignty. And I want to note that each one of these views is going to define sovereignty, the word sovereignty, in a different way. Some people define sovereignty that God determines all things. Other people, of which I am one, would define the word sovereignty as God can do whatever he wants to do whenever he wants to do it. That is to say, there's nothing restricting God. God calls the shots. Nothing restricts him. There's no power or force that manipulates him. He is all powerful. So that is what I mean by sovereignty. But I wanted to start off with just that word sovereignty because it's important for us to note that different people have different views on what sovereignty is. So the three Christian views in regards to God's sovereignty and man's free will are this. Number one, determinism. And I'm going to make sure you guys write this down in your notes because I'm going to expect you to know this on your midterm. Number one, determinism. The definition of determinism: God determines all things from the creation of the world to those who will become Christians. So God determines all things from the creation of the world to those who will become Christians. So God determines everything, including who will be saved, who will receive him. Number two, so the first view is determinism. God determines all things. Number two, libertarian free will. This view says that God graciously has given humans free will or choice and allows them to choose to participate in his plan and also to choose God himself. So the first view is that God determines all things, including those who will be his own people, his children. And the second view is that God gives human beings free choice. And we won't cover this in this class, but there are many people who believe in free will who also believe in election. But the question has to be asked, who is elect and what does elect mean? And that's another conversation for another day. But the word elect in the scriptures means choice. And God chooses people for different purposes in the scriptures. God chose Abraham and his descendants to be the people that would be a light to the nations and that would bring about the Messiah. But there were those within the chosen people who were not true Israelites because they didn't have faith. And Paul teaches that in the book of Romans. It was possible to be a part of the Israelites and not be a chosen person. Okay, so along comes Jesus, and Jesus is the chosen one, and all who are in Jesus are the elect, are the chosen people. So I kind of went on a rabbit trail there. Let me go back to the three views of sovereignty. We have determinism, we have libertarian free will, and number three, we have compatibilism. Now, this word compatibilism obviously comes from the word compatible, and compatible means two things can go together. And this view says that God determines all things from the creation of the world to those who will become Christians. That's the deterministic view. And God graciously has given humans free will and allows them to choose to participate in his plan, even to choose God himself. That's the libertarian free will view. So they take determinism, which says God chooses everything, he determines everything, and they take free will, which means man can choose whether or not he will choose God, follow God, and they say these two are compatible. They say that God, before the foundation of the world, elected certain people for salvation, and they also say that those people have the choice to choose to be saved. And What I would say to this group of people, of compatibilists, is it's not compatible. It's not compatible to say that God determines all things and then to say that humans have a choice in the matter. That's not compatible. And what often you will hear a compatibilist say is that it's a mystery. We don't know. It's a mystery how free will and sovereignty work together. It's a mystery. But I would say, no, actually, that's not a mystery. That's a contradiction. So we have to differentiate between what is a mystery and what is a logical contradiction. Let me explain. A mystery is, what is the Christmas gift? There under the Christmas tree is a present, and it has my name on it, and I don't know what it is. I go and I pick it up and I shake it, and oh man, I have no idea what this is. That's a mystery. It's a mystery because I have to wait to open it to find out what it is. But imagine that I had one Christmas gift, and inside of it was just one item. And there was two of you. And I looked at both of you and I said, I have one gift, but the two of you will get your very own. When you open this up, you'll each get your own. Well, you would look at me and you would say, huh? Is there like two pairs of gloves in there? No. It's just one gift inside. It's one thing inside. But you each get your own. Well, you'd look at me and say, that doesn't make sense. That's not logical. That's a contradiction. And so what I would say is we have to distinguish or differentiate between that which is a mystery and that which is a logical contradiction. There are things in the scriptures that are mysteries. Now, most of the time that Paul talks about mysteries, he's talking about the gospel, the good news about Jesus, like he talks about in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and other places throughout the scriptures. And so most of the time in the scriptures that this idea of the mystery of God is talked about, it is the gospel, and it was hidden for all of those people who came before Christ, all the people that lived during the Old Testament period. It was a mystery. The Messiah was a mystery to them. It was like a Christmas a gift under the tree. And Paul is now writing to the churches after Jesus has ascended back to heaven, and he's saying the mystery has been revealed to us. We got to open the present. So it's not a mystery. But there are things in the world, there are things about life, there are things in the scriptures where it's like, we'll have to wait and see till we get to heaven. But there's a difference between a mystery and a logical contradiction. Now, the reason I have mentioned this debate amongst Christians is because it affects very much the answer to the initial question that we asked. If God is all-powerful, there's nothing he can't do, all-loving, he selflessly does good on behalf of those he created, why does evil exist in the world he created? For someone who is a determinist, or for someone who's a compatibilist, they believe that God determines all things. Everything that you do, you might think you have a choice in the matter. You might think you're actually acting upon it. But it was God before the foundation of the world that determined that you would do that. For a determinist, for a compatibilist, they attribute the rape of a 5-year-old girl to God. All evil is God who did it. And they have cute little ways of saying, no, God has multiple wills. He has a He has, in one sense, he wills something, and in another sense, he wills it, but in a different way. But no matter how you cut it or dice it, it was God who determined the rape of that child, and it was for his glory, they say. And I'm very passionate about this because that goes against the very nature of God. God is so angry about evil. He's disgusted by evil. He has nothing to do with it. He did not bring it into existence. It came into existence because of our human beings' will, because of our human beings' choice and our foolish choices. I will be using C.S. Lewis' Mere Christianity, as you'll find it in the second book of Mere Christianity, the third chapter, titled The Shocking Alternative. And you will see shortly what Lewis believed and what I too find to be convincingly true. Lewis began the chapter with this statement: Christians believe that an evil power has made himself, for the present, the prince of this world. And of course that raises problems. Is this state of affairs in accordance with God's will or not? If it is, he is a strange God, you will say. And if it is not, how can anything happen contrary to the will of a being with absolute power? He goes on to talk about how something can go against what God would want and yet be something God allows. And how can that be? And this is the quote that I want you to listen to so carefully. This is one of my favorite quotes of C.S. Lewis in any of his writings. Quote, God created things which had free will. That means creatures which can go right or wrong. Some people think they can imagine a creature which was free but had no possibility of going wrong. But I can't. If a thing is free to be good, it's also free to be bad. And free will is what has made evil possible. Why then did God give them free will? Because free will, though it makes evil possible, is also the only thing that makes possible any love or goodness or joy worth having. A world of automata, of creatures that worked like machines, would hardly be worth creating. The happiness which God designs for his higher creatures is the happiness of being freely, voluntarily united to him and to each other in an ecstasy of love and delight, compared with which the most rapturous love between a man and a woman on this earth is mere milk and water. And for that, they've got to be free. Of course, God knew what would happen if they used their freedom the wrong way. Apparently, he thought it worth the risk. And then later, a few paragraphs later, if God thinks this state of war in the universe a price worth paying for free will, that is, for making a real world in which creatures can do real good or harm, and something of real importance can happen, instead of a toy world which only moves when he pulls the strings, then we may take it is worth paying. And that's on page 47. To summarize, when God gave man free will, he made it possible for them to do evil. But he made it possible He made it possible for them to do evil. He made it possible for them to reject him. He made it possible for them to hurt each other. But he also made it possible for them to choose him. So, what went wrong? Well, Christians for thousands of years have believed that there is a real demonic force which was once angelic and then went bad. This dark power convinced humans to believe the lie that God cannot be trusted, that we can only find happiness in our own. What Satan put into the heads of our remote ancestors was the idea that they could all be like gods, could set up on their own as if they had created themselves, be their own master, invent some sort of happiness for themselves outside of God, apart from God. And out of that hopeless attempt has come nearly all we call human history. Money, poverty, ambition, war, prostitution, classes, empires, slavery, the long, terrible story of man trying to find something other than God, which will make him happy. Now, I want to take an analogy that C.S. Lewis gives, and it's just such a beautiful analogy about a car and gasoline. We all know that if you put anything but gasoline into a car, it will never run. In fact, it will not only run, it will harm the car. And I want to give an illustration. When I was in Thailand, I had a Toyota pickup truck. And the type of truck was a Toyota Hilux Vigo. Very similar to a Toyota Tacoma, but they make them in Thailand. And it was actually the most popular vehicle in Thailand. But I happened to have a very rare kind because mine was gasoline. Most of the Toyota Vigos are diesel, and mine was gasoline. Right after I bought the truck, I pulled into a gas station, and we waited for a long time for the man who was pumping gas for us, because in Thailand you don't pump your own gas. There's an attendant that pumps the gas for you. And we waited an unusually long time for him to pump the gas. And I was on my phone, probably listening to some music, so I wasn't paying attention. But finally I heard a voice of someone yelling. And I looked in my driver's side mirror, and there was a man yelling at the man who was pumping gas for me. And I opened up the door and stepped out. And what had happened was the man who was pumping gas for me was new at the job there. And if you don't know this, a diesel pump is actually a lot bigger than a gasoline pump, the nozzle. And the purpose of that is so that you can't fit a diesel nozzle into a gasoline tank. So, well, there's multiple purposes, but that's one of them. Well, the man thought that I had a diesel truck, but I didn't. I had a gasoline truck, and he's trying to jam this diesel nozzle into my gasoline truck. And because he couldn't get it in, he just sprayed the diesel into the tank, and which is why it took him so long to fill it up. To make a long story short, it took about 2 hours. So I had to push the truck over to the side, and they put some hoses in there, and they had to siphon out all of the diesel out of my tank. I give you that silly illustration, but the reality is that the only thing that will make a gasoline truck run is gasoline. You have to put gasoline in it. Christians believe that God created us, and therefore He alone must know how we are to operate. Now, as we taught in an earlier lecture, we cannot keep the moral law, and therefore we need to be rescued from our sin, but it should be understood that God alone knows what is good for us. God designed the human machine to run on Himself. He Himself is the fuel our spirits were designed to burn. There is no other. That is why it is just no good asking God to make us happy in our own way. God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from Himself, because it is not there. There is no such anything, C.S. Lewis says. So the first answer to why is there evil in the world God created is that God gives his higher creatures free will. But this does not comfort us in the midst of heartache. It may be true, but why did God allow this to happen? In the next lecture, I want to talk about our emotions. And then in the final lecture on the problem of evil, I want to talk about the ultimate solution. But I wanted to start us off with this idea that God gives human beings free will. And in giving humans free will, he took the risk that man would reject him. He took the risk that man would abuse that power and hurt others. And so much of the evil in the world over human history, I should not say so much. I should say all of the evil over the course of human history is directly related to the fact that human beings had free will. And God does not step in and stop human beings from doing what they want to do. I know this class has gone long, but I'm going to give you one more analogy. I want you to imagine that I get home this evening and I pull into the driveway, I walk into the house, and I tell my wife, go get in the car right now, we're going on a date. And she says to me, but what about the kids? Like, they need baths and they need to be put to bed. Just go get in the car right now. Stop talking. Go get in the car right now. We're going on a date. Well, I mean, Scott, like, are you gonna, like, we got to take care of the kids, and like, where do you want to go? Just shut up and go get in the car right now. How do you think that date would go? Well, even though my wife and I have been married for 13 years, and I've taken her on dozens and dozens of dates, I still go to Christy and I say to her, I say, hey, do you want to go on a date with me? Because by definition, love allows the other person to choose. If I force my wife to do something, it's not love. It's not possible to love someone if you force them to do something. The idea that God forces human beings to do something, the idea that God determines what human beings will do, is detrimental to how we view the nature of God. God loves us and he gives us free will. He gives us choice. He allows us to reject him, but he also makes it possible for us to actually choose him. And it's a beautiful thing when we do. Take care, guys.